Hello, I'm Mariam Mashiri, live from the Qatari capital Doha. It's day 17 of the US-Israel war with Iran. Over the next 10 minutes or so, we'll bring you our special programme looking at the key developments from today. Well, after a wave of attacks on shipping in the Gulf, President Trump warns NATO faces a very bad future if allies do not help secure the Strait of Hormuz, complaining that some were not that enthusiastic about getting involved. Keir Starmer says he and his allies are working on a plan to secure the vital waterway, but insists the UK will not be drawn into a wider war over Iran. The Israeli military says it's begun a wide-scale wave of strikes in parts of Iran and has detailed plans for at least 3 more weeks of war. Iran continues with retaliatory strikes across the region. The UAE's biggest port and oil storage facility, Fujairah, has been hit, and a drone sparked a fuel tank fire near Dubai airport. Several explosions were heard also across Doha. After fresh strikes on Beirut, the IDF said it's begun limited and targeted ground operations, in its words, against Iranian-backed Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Well, President Trump has criticised his allies for their reluctance to help break the Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, saying countries protected by American troops did not want to get involved. He added that the US military campaign against Iran has continued in full force in recent days. Take a listen.
Numerous countries have told me they're on the way. Some are very enthusiastic about it, and some aren't. Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me.
Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, was listening to the president and has more from Washington.
Of all the countries that Donald Trump has asked for assistance, he seems particularly irritated with the UK and with Keir Starmer. He is still annoyed that there was a delay, albeit only 24 hours, in the US being allowed to use British air bases. He's still frustrated that he says that the offer of naval ships was too late after he claims America had already won the war in Iran. And of the help that he's asking for now, he says the UK might help maybe, but they should help enthusiastically, and said clearly the level of enthusiasm matters to him, because this isn't just a case of the military assistance that he needs. He is openly admitting that he sees this as a test of loyalty for allies, saying that America doesn't need the help, he claims, because it's the strongest country in the world, as he always says, but he wants to see what allies will do when they are asked, because of the long suspicion he's always had that allies who rely on America in some circumstances wouldn't necessarily come to the aid of the US when they were required. So it's a particularly difficult time, I think, with the mood the president's in, to be trying to stand up against him.
Earlier today, Germany and Britain ruled out any NATO involvement in attempts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But the British Prime Minister said London was working with individual allies on a plan to secure the vital waterway. Keir Starmer also insisted the UK would not be drawn into what he described as a wider war.
We are working with others to come up with a credible plan for the Straits of Hormuz to ensure that we can reopen shipping and passage through the strait. Let me be clear, that won't be, and it's never been envisaged to be, a NATO mission.
Ben Chu from BBC Verify has been looking at what role the Royal Navy could play in any operation, and also the risks involved.
Here is one of the potential threats to shipping in that vital waterway: Iranian mines. The Iranian military inventory includes the Sadaf 02C mine, designed to sit just below the waterline and detonate after contact with a passing ship. Reports suggest the Iranian regime, in response to the US and Israeli strikes since the 28th of February, has deployed some mines in the Hormuz Strait already, although we haven't been able to independently verify this. The UK has 8 ships able to sweep for mines. Here's an example of a Royal Navy Sandown-class minesweeper vessel, the HMS Bangor. China and the US also have a number of counter-mine vessels. However, it's important to bear in mind that the threat from Iran to commercial shipping is not just from mines, it's also from small, fast boats and also drones. The US has suggested the US Navy could provide an escort for tankers passing through the strait to guard against these kind of potential attacks. Now, the UK Type 45 naval destroyer like HMS Defender do have the capability to defend against drones, yet there are obvious dangers for UK ships of getting involved in any potential escort operations, as they could become targets themselves.
Iran has mounted more retaliatory strikes across the region. Qatar says it's intercepted a second wave of missiles from Iran following an early attack, and targets have also been hit in the UAE. Well, our correspondent Azadeh Mashiri is in Dubai. Azadeh, lots of people on socials asking about Dubai Airport. Tell us more about those attacks that have taken place today across the Gulf.
Yes, so Gulf countries are still being pulled into this war because of their ties with the United States. Whether it's the UAE here, Saudi Arabia or Qatar, they've all talked about intercepting attacks from Iran, Iraq, Kuwait. These countries have also reported attacks. Now, it's not the first time that Iran has targeted countries in this region, but it's the scale that's different, which is why we've heard officials say they're surprised by what they're witnessing. Now, perhaps that's Iran trying to pressure these countries to urge the United States to end the war. Unclear if that's working. What is clear is that leaders here are furious, particularly here in the UAE, where they have played a mediating role. Oman, of course, has played a major one over the years. Here in the United Arab Emirates, they're worried about whether there will be long-term impacts to their image, to their economy. Here in Dubai, it's a city of expats. To see Dubai International Airport with a fire breaking out from a drone-related incident earlier today, to see another major oil terminal in the eastern part of the country in Fujairah see a fire break out, to have a missile drop on top of a car and kill a civilian, a Palestinian civilian. These are incidents that are major blows to the image of safety and security that the UAE has built in this volatile region. And when you think of Dubai, you think of the beautiful, glamorous glass towers behind me, you think of tourism, and you do, above all, think of safety. So people here are very worried about the long-term consequences.
Azadeh, thank you very much indeed. Well, in the first 17 days of this conflict, thousands of people have been killed across the region. Millions have been displaced, tens of thousands have been injured. In Iran, more than 3,000 people have been killed, according to a US-based human rights group. At least 206 of them were children. The UN says 3.2 million people have been displaced inside the country. In Lebanon, authorities say 886 people have been killed and more than 1 million people have now been displaced. Israeli authorities say 12 civilians have been killed by missile fire since the start of this war and more than 2,000 people displaced. Across the Gulf states, at least 18 people have now been killed, as well as 13 US service members and 1 French soldier. Well, BBC Persian has been speaking to people at the Iran-Turkey border. One man who travelled from Hamadan told us about morale inside Iran.
Everyone wants security, and we also want our country to be safe. Naturally, young children are afraid. I cannot deny that. War is frightening for them. Bombs are frightening and bombings are frightening. But when they are with adults, they feel calmer. I have also lived through the Iran-Iraq war. This is the second war we've witnessed up close, but for us it has become something somewhat familiar. That doesn't mean we welcome it, but we are not overwhelmed with fear of war.
BBC Persian has also heard from people inside Iran today. Their messages have been voiced up by our colleagues.
Iran's internet is really slow now. We are really worried about getting identified. If they do, I fear that we might be executed.
I went to the hairdresser today, although I was really worried about the situation outside. It was really busy. I feel like some people are still hopeful. I heard a loud explosion when I was there, but people are used to it now.
On day 17 of this war, lots of questions are being asked online about the Strait of Hormuz and also whether more countries will be drawn into the conflict. Well, joining me now to help answer some of those questions is our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, lots of our viewers on YouTube and TikTok asking about President Trump's comments about policing the Strait of Hormuz and his complaints that some of America's allies are not that enthusiastic. What does policing the strait actually mean?
It's so good to join you again, Mariam, and it's really good to keep getting these questions from our viewers because it helps us to understand what people are really interested in, and it affirms for us just how much these issues matter. Yes, President Trump has been talking again today about the need for America's allies to come to its support. You heard from Sarah Smith, our North America editor, saying that it wasn't because America needed their support. He was testing his allies. But to use the expression in the question, policing this critical waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, is very costly and very risky. And President Trump says he has had some countries saying they are going to help. But those who have voiced a response in public have all been very cautious. And as you've been reporting, Britain and Germany say they don't want to be drawn into a wider war. They say this is not NATO's war. And the defense minister of Germany, Boris Pistorius, was even more blunt. He said, this is not our war. We didn't get consulted about this war. And it underlines, too, that most of these allies want to separate policing or opening up the Strait of Hormuz from a wider war started by America. They weren't consulted on, and still not really clear what the war aims are. And if you look to other countries around the world, Mariam, Japan, for example, which has strict limits in its constitution about any military engagement, has said it's not going to get involved. And then you have India, which says, why don't you do this through diplomacy? Policing the Strait of Hormuz would mean that the tankers and the other vessels could go through it safely without coming under attack by the Iranian forces. And India negotiated with Iran and did manage to get 2 India-flagged gas tankers through at the weekend. But of course, a lot of other countries don't have those kind of relationships with Iran. So this is going to continue to be a big question. And it's having, I'm sure our viewers know, it's having ripple effects across the region and around the world.
And Lise, people are also wondering whether this means other countries will be drawn into this conflict as well.
Well, that is the real concern. Already this war has escalated faster and further than any wars we've seen in a region that has seen all too many wars. What military planners talk about is that there's a horizontal escalation as well as being an intensification of attacks too. Again today we heard from Israeli military officials saying that they've attacked a whole range of targets, mostly targeting infrastructure across Iran. And so you have this effect that so many countries, whether it's right all the way to the United States, to farmers in Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, saying and people going to the market saying that their food prices are being affected, the prices at the petrol pumps are being affected, the rationing of gas and oil everywhere in the Philippines, in Myanmar. This is having global consequences. And because people, again, to emphasize, there are still big questions about why this war started and when it's going to end. What is it all about? What are the main aims? That a lot of countries are really reluctant to let their forces become involved. And for this region, for example, if countries like Britain became involved in policing the Strait of Hormuz, they'd be regarded as belligerents, and therefore they could possibly come under attack.
Lise, as always, thank you. Well, whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thanks so much for your time. We're back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.